Last 100 days, I got the best gear in the game, beat all of Minecraft's strongest mobs, built a very overpowered gold farm, and did some other stuff. And if you watched my last video, you'd know I added a little bit of lore to this series, so I highly recommend you check that out first. So Killam, what are you planning to do in today's video? Good question. In today's 100 days video, I plan to focus on industrializing my world, aka making farms, since I thought the last video was focused too much on basically just speedrunning the game. You also might notice that the audio quality changes at day 150, but that's because I got a new microphone, so please tell me what you guys think of it in the comment section. Anyways, as always, please consider liking and subscribing. It's free and it helps us, content creators, make more videos for you guys. And with that out of the way, I hope you enjoy this video. On day 101, we were back where we left off. For those of you who for some reason haven't watched the first 100 days video, then you probably wouldn't know that I spent the last 2 days just reflecting on everything that happened during my journey. And during that time, I was able to ascertain 3 things. First was that the strange voice inside me acts as some sort of guide for me. After all, its advice is what allowed me to rise to the top in this world. However, the second thing I discovered was that its knowledge isn't omnipotent. This started happening after I defeated the Ender Dragon, and ever since then there were many cases wherein the voice was unaware or even wrong about certain things. In light of this, the last thing I learned was that I needed to further prepare myself if I wanted to not only survive, but thrive in this world. And the first step for that was to resupply myself with totems of undying, because without them I would have already died 3 times. At first, I was thinking of paying a visit to a new woodland mansion, but the voice suggested that doing a raid would be easier and more beneficial for me. To start one, the voice said I needed to get the bad omen effect by killing a pillager captain. The voice instructed me to locate a pillager tower since they were constantly spawning there. Although there were a few things bothering me, such as the true identity of the voice and that vision I had when I woke up in this world and opened the end portal, I decided to mull over them another time. Anyways, I was able to find a pillager tower that was relatively nearby and quickly get my bad omen. Next, I started a raid at a village I passed by on the way to the tower and got to work on defeating the invaders. Not gonna lie, this was easier than I expected. I mean, I was able to even take a nap mid-fight and breeze through each wave, so surely I won't Alright, I forgot I had to protect the villagers. After cleaning up the stragglers, I had 5 totems of undying, which was what I came here for. However, I honestly just couldn't accept this result, so I just returned to the pillager tower for another try. I was planning to set up another portal there for easier access, but for whatever reason it linked to my base portal, so I spent the rest of the day fixing this issue. The next day, I needed a new village to start a raid. Although I could start one at my base, I didn't want to risk having any of my villagers killed, so I opted to visit one of the villages I passed by on the way to the end portal. After setting up the portal at appropriate coordinates, I unexpectedly found myself in an underground cave. Seriously, nether portals are a pain. Anyways, I dug my way up to the village, then started the raid. Just like last time, the raid was pretty easy. I mean, I was able to take a nap again and even fool around a bit during the chaos. However, unlike last time, I made sure to trap a few villagers inside their homes, so I was of course able to come out victorious this time. After I won the raid, I not only acquired 4 more totems but also gained an effect called Hero of the Village, which supposedly gives me discounts for villager trades. While it was still active, the voice advised me to use it to upgrade a few tools since they would be useful for future projects, so I spent days 104 to 105 purchasing the books needed to max out an extra fortune pickaxe, a fortune shovel, a pair of shears, and a flint and steel. Afterwards, I spent the rest of day 105 sorting out my shulker boxes. On day 106, I color-coded my shulker boxes before brewing some potions of night vision. I needed them for what could be the biggest project I have yet, which was a tier 4 diamond beacon. Using night vision potions would allow me to not only save coal, but also speed up the strip mining process, which is what I did for the next 4 days. Unfortunately, when I returned to the surface on day 110, I didn't have nearly enough diamond ores to even come close to making a tier 4 diamond beacon. And although I was a bit disappointed, at least I decided to start this project now rather than later. Anyways, my tools were quite low in durability after days of mining, so I visited my gold farm to mend them. However, while I was there, I noticed that the storage system had been filled to the brim with gold swords, which meant that it was in need of an upgrade. That would require a ton of iron, which I've always been low on, so I was clueless as to how I should settle this. As if hearing my concerns, the voice gave me the blueprints of what it called an iron farm. But before I started that project, I mined all the ores I acquired during my mining session with my fortune pickaxe, and here's what I got. The next day marked the beginning of the so-called Iron Farm project. Since I wanted it to be located near my base, I needed to mine a large area for it since the terrain wasn't too flat. This took 3 days to do so, even though I was able to practically insta-mine through everything. Once I was done with that, I marked a 27 by 27 block area to get a basic idea as to where the farm would be at. Afterwards, I located the center of the perimeter and went 5 blocks up. For those of you who don't know, the basic mechanism of an iron farm is to abuse the iron golem spawn feature that occurs in villages. In Bedrock Edition, iron golems will only spawn at the highest possible Y level within their range, so making a platform above the villager area would make it to where iron golems can only spawn in the kill zone. To make the platform, all you have to do is build 8 blocks out from all sides of the center block, then fill in the quadrants to get a 17 by 17 block platform. Then go up 1 block and make a 4 block thick ring surrounding the platform you just made. Once you're done with that, you have to go up another block and surround the entire platform by 1 block to prevent water from going over the edge. You also have to place some blocks at the corners to prevent water sources from appearing. And speaking of water, I had quite a hard time with it because I messed up on my first attempt. You see, I actually made infinite water sources by placing water the blocks right beside the corners, which made me have to redo it a few times. After that, since the iron golem platform was only missing the killing mechanism, I shifted my attention to the second part of the farm, which was the villager trading hall that would go beneath the platform I just made. The voice had the design of an iron farm that didn't need this, but I opted for this one instead since I already had a bunch of useful villagers that could be used for it. However, while I was building the floor and walls of the trading hall, I stumbled upon a wandering trader that sold me an item called a mangrove propagule. Just like the time with the strange blue fairies in the woodland mansion and the wither, the voice was yet again confused with the situation. While I wasn't too surprised, it made me question how it knew the identity of the warden and the sculpt blocks. After all, the ancient city was definitely something that appeared after the world underwent some sort of change, since the voice was unaware of the warden's overall specs and the lab underneath the city's centerpiece. So if that's the case, does that mean the voice had somehow adapted to the changes of the world? And if so, what triggered it? I kept on thinking about this until I finished most of the trading hall, but was unfortunately unable to come up with an answer. So I instead shifted my focus onto probably the most annoying part of the iron farm, the villagers. My original plan was to use profession blocks to lead them to their new home, but this proved to be quite inefficient after I led 2 librarians. So I instead made a railway to transport the remaining villagers. Keep in mind that it's important to remove all the beds and profession blocks that they could link to prevent future issues. While I was moving them, the voice told me that iron golems will only start spawning if 75% of the villagers that were part of the village were employed. This meant that nitwits could potentially break the farm, which also meant that I had to dispose of them. While Like and Subscribe was a nitwit, he's pretty much free real estate for me, so I decided to spare him. However, the other one wasn't as lucky. Now that I had successfully relocated most of my villagers, I decided to build the iron golem killing mechanism, which is just a bunch of signs in lava. Afterwards, I decided to sleep once it was getting dark to keep my villagers as safe as possible. The following day, I replaced the center pillar with hoppers to collect the item drops above, then started placing down the villagers' beds since a village can't exist without them. Now this is probably one of the most important parts of the farm because the first villager to link with a bed would be considered as the villager leader. Although the voice said there were no official terms for this, I found it easier to understand if it was named as such since the iron golem's spawning area would have the villager leader's bed at the center of it. Therefore, it is of utmost importance that the first few beds you place are located at the center of the farm. To do so, all you have to do is surround the hoppers at the center with 1 block, then place 4 beds on top of all of them. Afterwards, you just need to keep extending the bed area until you are satisfied with the number, since the number of beds determines the maximum number of villagers you can get through breeding. In my case, the area I built could accommodate 44 villagers, but I decided to place 40 beds instead since I needed space for an entrance. Now that that was done, the next step is to just have the villagers do their thing. While waiting, I made a temporary roof on top of the trading hall to protect them, and redid the iron golem killing mechanism since their drops could potentially get stuck on top of the center slab. After that, most of the new villagers still hadn't matured, so I started making the pods where each villager would stay. Once I was done with that, pretty much all of the villagers were grown up, so I started guiding them to their respective pods. However, as I was doing so, I realized that there were less villagers than expected. This happened because I didn't give them enough food, so after feeding them I was forced to wait again. And since I already trapped a few new villagers, I figured I might as well pass time by locking some useful trades. The final batch of villagers matured on day 132, so I continued guiding them to the remaining pods. Once I was done with that, the farm was pretty much done. I was able to confirm that the farm was working on day 133, so all that was left to do was lock the villager trades, make a proper entrance, and add the zombification mechanism. The entrance was done by day 134, but locking the villager trades would take a while considering that they just had so many of them. So while doing that, I decided to work on the zombification mechanism. And of course, this needed a zombie, so on day 135, I kidnapped a random zombie that I appropriately named Frankenstein. I then started making the railway system that would guide him to his meals. Minecarts will always slow down on a deactivated power rail, so by using this feature you can create this alternated regular and power rails pattern to easily move your zombie to his next meal. This took longer than it should have because I did a bit of designing, which I gotta admit wasn't really worth it. But anyways, once it was finished, I made sure to lock my villagers' trades before bringing in Frankenstein to do his job. Obviously, with this many villagers, I would need a lot of golden apples and potions of weaknesses. The first wasn't too big of a deal since I could buy apples from my villagers and restock on gold from my gold farm, and as for the second one, instead of using the more costly potions of weaknesses, I decided to use the remaining tipped arrows of weakness from my warden fight as a substitute. Additionally, I made a crossbow with quick charge and unbreaking specifically for the curing process. I finished one round of zombie curing on day 138, then paid a visit to like and subscribe who is now an armorsmith. For those of you who are confused, there's a unique feature in Bedrock Edition that allows nitwits to become regular villagers through zombie curing. And if you're wondering why I made him an armorsmith instead of a librarian, it's just that I'm sure I'll be visiting him often for his iron trades. But kill him! If he knew this feature, then why didn't you do the same thing for your other nitwit villager? And to that, I answer that I was lazy, okay? Getting a nitwit villager inside their pod is much harder than you think. Anyways, while I was checking the discounts of my villagers, I noticed that I somehow didn't lock the trades of one of my villagers. So I spent the rest of day 138 until the morning of day 139 rerolling his trades until I got sharpness 5. At this point, I was a bit tired from all the building and villager trading that I just did, so I spent the rest of day 139 doing a few simple things such as making a food shulker box, making my psycho axe an actual psycho axe, adding mending to my crossbow, and tweaking the floor design of my trading hall. At this point, you must be thinking, wow, he's finally done. He can finally do something more interesting. And to that, all I have to say is that you're wrong. There's one more thing I have to do for this project, and I promise that this is the last one. I just wanted to make a simple item sorting system for the iron golden drop since the hopper system I'm currently using just looks horrendous. So I spent days 140 to 142 covering the hopper system with a small storage area and making an underground room for the item drops from the iron farm. I plan to make this storage system have an automatic sorting system which will segregate the item drops on its own. To make an item sorter, the first thing you need to do is place down the number of chests you want on top of each other, then put hoppers behind them. Next, place a temporary block here and a hopper pointing towards it. Afterwards, place a block here, then put a redstone comparator on top of it. Make sure that the comparator is facing away from the hopper. The next step is to simply place glass, a target block, and 3 blocks in this pattern. Then place redstone on top of all of them except for the target block and the block nearest to the comparator. Once you're done with that, grab a redstone torch and place it on the side of the target block that's below the redstone comparator. All that's left to do from here is to simply open your topmost hopper, then place your desired item to be sorted in the first slot and 1 filter block in each of the remaining slots. And voila! You now have a functioning item sorter. From here, all you need to do is repeat the process for all the items you want and make the hopper system on top of it. In my case, I decided to have 3 item sorters for iron and 1 for the poppies. The chests on the right are simply there for overflow protection. And that's pretty much it. The iron farm was finally finished after only 32 days of hard work. At this point, you'd probably be thinking that the next thing I would do is upgrade the gold farm storage since that's literally the reason why I made the iron farm. However, for whatever reason, I decided to start a different project, which is a wool farm. I honestly have no clue what was going on in my head, even the voice was confused with my decision, but I just felt like having one this early would make some of the things I plan to build in the future much easier. So, on day 143, I decided to use the old villager area as the spot for the wool farm. Of course, like the iron farm, the area wasn't suitable for construction just yet, so I spent the rest of the day clearing out a portion of the area and marking out the places where the sheep would go. The next day, I was mining out space for the farm's basement. Originally, Wolf's farms didn't need this much space, but I wanted an automatic sorting system like the iron farm, so this project ended up being more expensive and time-consuming than expected. I mean, I used stacks of iron just to make this incomplete hopper system. Anyways, on day 145, I planned out the location of the sorting system's chests and starting out mining out space for the needed redstone. Once I was done with that, I spent that day until the morning of 147 making the wool farms for the 16 different colors of sheep I wanted. How this farm would work is that whenever a sheep eats grass to regain its wool, the observer block would detect a change in the block, then send a redstone signal to the dispenser that would shear the sheep. The items are then collected by the item cart below the grass block the sheep is on and would be sent down the hopper system. If you're wondering why I placed so much grass, that's because having more of it would quicken the rate at which the grass regrows, which would also increase the farm's rates. However, a wool farm can't be one without the sheep, so I spent the next 3 days transporting them then dyeing them. Afterwards, all that was left to do was to make the sorting system. I've already done this for the iron farm, so I won't explain the process again and just show you the final product, except I built it up 1 block too high. So after rebuilding it, the farm was pretty much finished. The sheep farm were being automatically sheared, the wool would get collected by the hoppers, and would then get sorted into chests below. So now I can finally... Wait, why is that sheep in the wrong place? That's better. Now it's done with absolutely no more issues, I hope. Anyways, going back to what I was saying, the next step to this project is a rather simple one, which is to decorate it. Personally, I find it pretty funny how I decided to decorate the inner parts of my farm so much, yet have done nothing for the exterior. Obviously, I'll build something around these farms someday, but I'm a bit indecisive with the theme I want to go with for my base area, so just bear with me for now. Anyways, I went with a similar design as my iron farm, except rather than having dark oak wood planks in between pillars of dark oak logs, I decided to make the wall just purely logs, and I don't know why, but I just love the look of this. I mean, a lot of trees had to go for this, but it was worth it. Now that that exhausting project was done, I felt like the basement was a bit too bland, especially on the left and right sides. Now a normal person would probably just put some furniture there, but no. I wanted to build a sugarcane farm. Now this may not seem like a bad idea, but considering that I already had an absurd amount of hoppers near my base, it kinda was, since lag could become an issue. However, because I would probably spend a lot of time at my base area, I thought it would be beneficial to have it running in the background despite the repercussions. Originally, I was planning to have the farm on display at the side of these chests, but the space turned out to be smaller than expected, so instead I resorted to just placing some sugarcane at the front, then building the actual farm in the back. I won't give a tutorial for this because it's really common and straightforward, but essentially how this farm works is that whenever a sugarcane grows up to 3 blocks tall, an observer would detect that change and trigger the pistons below them to activate and harvest them. The items are then picked up by a hopper minecart below them and will eventually go to a hopper system connected to this single chest. This took quite a long time since the space was quite cramped and the logistics were a bit more complicated than expected, but it works, so it's all fine. On another note, in between building this farm, I decided to name my pirate Quail, which was the suggestion from BuzzG, who was the only person that actually recommended the name. So if you guys want to name something in this world, then please let me know down in the comment section. Anyways, I was a little burnt out from all the building and redstone I did, so I spent the rest of day 161 doing some capitalism, checking my wool farm, and restocking my fireworks supply. On day 162, I finally decided to do something I've been procrastinating for some time now, and no, it's not making a house. I can still survive without one for a couple more 100 days. I decided to finally upgrade my gold farm. I mean, I spent 30 plus days building an iron farm for this exact purpose, and somehow got sidetracked building 2 farms. Now the gold farm itself was working exceptionally well, but the issue lies with the limited storage system. I didn't even need the voice's help with this because all I really needed to do was make a sorting system capable of handling the influx of items, which is much simpler than it sounds, and to do so the first thing I had to do was to destroy this old storage area and make a new area a few blocks underneath it. Next I made a set of auto sorters for each trident killer to avoid the chance of items backing up. I went with 2 sorters for gold nuggets, 1 for ingots, and 2 for rotten flesh. The excess items, specifically the gold swords, will then go to these blast furnaces that will smelt them down into even more gold. This unbelievably took around 4 days to complete just because of the amount of wood I needed to chop down for the hoppers and chests. Anyways, since the smelting part of the sorting system needed a good amount of fuel, I decided to add a floor beneath the sorting area dedicated for this purpose. I went with lava since it lasts long and is, according to the voice, a renewable resource with the help of dripstone and cauldrons. However, I needed more dripstone than I currently had, so I went out, found a dripstone cave, grabbed some dripstone, got sidetracked by a mineshaft, stole some cobwebs, and went back home to complete the fuel area. At this point, the farm was supposed to be done, but the smelting portion of the sorting system needed to be remodeled because the blast furnaces slots that the gold swords and lava buckets were supposed to go were interchanged. So after fixing that, I just connected each sorting system to a trident killer, then tested it the following day. The sorting system was working perfectly well, except for the cases where an item like a gold nugget somehow passes through the auto sorters and clogs up the blast furnaces. I honestly was too lazy to figure out the solution to this, so I just left it be, and from that moment until the next day, I decided to make more tools since I somehow lost my Silk Touch netherite shovel. I don't know when that happened, but while I was at it, I decided to max out a fortune axe, a riptide trident, and another trident with channeling. I also had to get a new zombie because I actually killed Frankenstein, so I named him Frank and pretended as if nothing happened. From days 172 to 174, I wanted to convert my new tools into netherite since diamonds are kinda lame now. So in order to flex my wealth, I did some more tree chopping, grabbed some wool from my wool farm, then headed into the nether where I was immediately mauled by a group of pigmen. I don't know why they were so mad. I mean, all I did was turn their kind into a renewable resource, nothing too serious. Anyways, after leaving the scene, I went deeper underground and started bed bombing for some netherite. I was able to return home with 41 ancient debris, and combined with the leftovers I got from the last 100 days, I had exactly enough to make 11 netherite ingots, which is more than what I definitely needed. But since I had it, before converting my tools into netherite, I crafted them into a block to flex my wealth on you guys. This is actually the second time I was able to craft a netherite block, but I forgot to record the first time in the last 100 days, and I don't think I ever showed this, but I actually got a maxed out fortune hoe from the ancient city last time, which is why I didn't make a fortune hoe if you were wondering. Moving on from that, I wanted to start my next project, which was a mob farm. Now this isn't your usual trash mob farm that would get you only like 5 mobs per minute, but a very massive one that would get me around 11,000 items per hour. This may not seem much for Java Edition players, but for Bedrock players like me, this is probably the best mob farm that could be made. Now one could argue that I could have built a creeper farm instead since I was in need of gunpowder, but I thought that I could use the string and bones in the future. Again, I got this design from The Voice, so this isn't something that came out of my tiny brain. Anyways, the next 12 days were spent gathering the necessary supplies for this behemoth of a build. I won't give you a detailed list of it because a lot of the items were easy to get but very tedious to do, such as glass and stone, but I'll mention the ones that I think need to be explained, namely the scaffolding, the tridents, the coral fans, and packed ice. Let's start with the scaffolding. For the farm, I would need about 1.5 shulker boxes worth of it, and to craft them, I would need a lot of string and bamboo. The first wasn't too big of a problem since if you were paying attention, I stole a lot of cobwebs from a mineshaft a few days back, and as for the bamboo, I already had a ton of it from clearing the bamboo forest near my base. Moving on to the tridents, I needed to have 2 of them for my farm to work. I already had them for my last drowned, so I only needed to add impaling 5 onto each of them. Next up were the coral fans, which were probably the most expensive and annoying thing to do. Although I could just get them from the coral reef biome near my base, I would need more than 8 stacks of them for the farm, which considering the amount of time I had, wasn't too viable of an option. So in light of this, The Voice gave me another design of a farm that would allow me to get all the coral fans I needed. I won't show you how to build this because it's literally just a bone meal dispenser and redstone clock, but it was honestly way too painful. The amount of bone meal used in proportion to the coral fans I got was super low, to the point that I had to go to the nether and get a lot of bone blocks, and it still wasn't enough. By the way, while I was at the nether, I did find an unexplored bastion, so I went in, got some worthwhile loot, and nothing bad happened. Going back to the coral fans, I ended up just manually collecting the rest of them since the farm already provided me with most of what I needed. Last but not least was the packed ice. For this I needed to locate the frozen ocean biome, so I of course had to traverse the overworld with my elytra. Thankfully it was raining, so with the power of Riptide I was able to quickly find a frozen ocean biome thousands of blocks away. By the way, during my journey I found a weird swamp that was very muddy and infested with these trees that had massive roots. The Voice confirmed that this was the same biome where the wandering trader got that mangrove propagule I bought a while ago from, but judging by how little information it gave me, it seemed like it was clueless about this place as well. I didn't think much of it since this is literally like the 4th or 5th time this has happened, so I just let The Voice be. And after 12 days of hard work, these 9 shulker boxes are the materials needed to build half of the farm. I know, this is only enough for half of it. You must be wondering why I decided to do this, but considering how expensive it would have been and how much time I had left, I felt like it was the right choice. And I mean, even though it's half of the farm, you'll still be able to get me 5,000 items per hour, so it isn't a total waste. I'll probably make the other half of the farm in another 100 days video, but for now, this should be enough. And as you can probably guess, I spent the remainder of this 200 days video building this farm. Now the location of it is important since it uses something called split density, which pretty much allows 2 mob farms to operate at the same time. So for the most optimal rates, I decided to build my farm over the ocean, then built all the way up to Y level 173. Now for split density to kick in, there must be 4 chunks in between the 2 farms, and at the center of it must be your AFK area. It is important that you AFK in between the corners of 4 chunks or else the farm will not be working as well as intended. I honestly have no clue what a chunk is or how to find them, but The Voice just told me to put a banner on an armor stand and change its pose, and for whatever reason, I was able to see these so-called chunks. Although it was indeed helpful, it made me even more curious as to what exactly The Voice was. It was already one thing that it knew so much about the world, but for it to be able to make me see these things just makes it even more mysterious. Knowing that what I was doing was just pointless thinking and any conclusion I came to was just mere speculation, I decided to just focus on the job at hand. After choosing my AFK spot, I decided to mark out the chunks in between the would-be mob farms for planning purposes. To do so, I grabbed the sunflower, placed it down, then outlined the 2x2 chunk area on the left and right of the sunflower. If you're wondering what the sunflower's purpose is, according to the voice, the farms must be located in the north and south directions, meaning that the sunflower that for whatever reason always points to the east will be very helpful. Now again, I won't go into detail of the blueprints of this farm because I can't explain it that well, so I'll just briefly go over the following steps. Once I was done building the outlines, I made my AFK platform and an ice pathway that would lead all the XP and items from the farm to the AFK area. It won't be just a straight line since there will be two Trident Killers working at the same time, so it did have to split into two different directions after extending 4 blocks out from the glass outlines. And just as I was about to build the Trident Killers, I gotta admit, I did get a little distracted by a passing thunderstorm. So instead of spending what little time I had left for this video on a very overpowered farm, I did go hunt for some mob heads instead, but it was honestly worth increasing my head collection since I was able to see thunder strike even when there was no rain, which I found very amusing by the way. After that, I returned to the mob farm and finished the Trident Killers. Next, I put glass on the sides of the ice pathway, made the water streams that would lead the items and XP to the AFK area, and encased the ice pathway with glass again. From there, I made the redstone line that would activate the Trident Killers, then added another layer of blocks around the Trident Killers for precautionary measures. With that done, the next step was to connect the two Trident Killers with magma blocks, then extend another 8 blocks out on the other side of the Trident Killers. Afterwards, I encased the magma blocks 1 block up with glass, then started making the spawning platforms, which is basically just a bunch of stone bricks, glass, scaffolding, coral fans, signs, and water. I also made a simple water system on top of the magma blocks before mobs actually started spawning. Now I needed to build 8 layers of these spawning platforms, and even though I averaged 1 layer per day, which should have theoretically allowed me to finish the farm exactly on day 200, I met an unexpected issue on day 196. Which was glass. You see, I forgot to account for the glass needed for the chunk outlines, so I was forced to go back home and smelt some sand, which took way too long to do by the way. To put this into perspective, while waiting for my glass, I was able to restock my wool farm with shears, label the chests in my wool farm and iron farm, make massive contributions to the economy, and it still wasn't done. Now, there was no way I was going to be able to finish the farm in the 3 days I had left. Heck, I don't think I would have been able to finish building all the spawning platforms. And as irresponsible as it is, I decided to extend this video by a few days since I felt like it would be a bit awkward to start the next one continuing this project. I'm sorry if this upsets you in any way. I know that SB does this quite often in his 100 Days series, but I still think it's wrong to do this, so I'll try my best to stick to the deadline as much as possible in future videos. Anyways, after finishing the layers of pain, all that was left to do was build the roof, a better on and off switch, the bubble elevator that would send XP to me, and a very half-assed storage system since I didn't want to work on it for very long. And with that, the farm was finally done. From here, all I did was AFK for a bit to test the efficiency of the farm, and while I sat there idly, I found myself thinking about the identity of the voice again. I know I said that contemplating on this would only be a waste of energy, but no matter how I thought about it, it was weird. The voice was something that's been with me ever since waking up in this world, and while its reliability has fallen ever since I conquered the end, it still amazes me as to how it knows so much about this world. Farms, item information, techniques, abilities, and so on and so forth, the list of what it's capable of just keeps going on, and it feels like I've only just scratched the surface of it. But as mysterious as it is, I strangely don't think it means any harm. Just like how it provided me with the design of this amazing mob farm, it has only ever helped me throughout my journey, and while I did have to do some dangerous stuff for the goals it had set out, it still seemed to be on my side. But I can only hope that we can maintain this relationship for the rest of our journey.